So over the past couple of days, I've been messing around with browser automation using Ruby and Selenium Webdriver, and it is super cool. So I've been having a ton of fun messing around with this, and I wanted to do a video today where we just dive into building our own script using Ruby with Selenium. So then what we're going to do in this video right now is write a script that will open up a new instance of Firefox, navigate to Hacker News, collect all of the data from the homepage of Hacker News, save it to a CSV or JSON file, then navigate to Google, log into Gmail, and then open up a spreadsheet and dump all of that data from Hacker News into a spreadsheet. So before we get started, let's take a look at the script that we're going to build in action. So I'm just going to run my script. Alright, so before we get started, in order to use Firefox with Selenium, you need to install something called geckodriver. So it's pretty simple. You can just do brew install geckodriver, and that is what's going to allow us to actually use Firefox with Selenium. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to install the gem Selenium Webdriver. And we're also going to be using pry in this video just so that we can throw debuggers into our code. So if you don't already have it, you can also gem install pry. So before we get started, let's actually just jump into an IRB console and just play around with Selenium Webdriver a little bit. So I'm going to open up a new IRB console, and I'm going to require in Selenium Webdriver, which is the gem that we just installed. And what we can do then is we can basically do driver. So we can create a new variable called driver, and we can set that equal to Selenium ;Webdriver, and we can do .for and pass in Firefox. And that's basically all that we need to do to open up a new instance of Firefox. So from there, we can basically navigate around to whatever web page we want. So we can do driver.get, and in this example, I'm going to go to Hacker News. So I'm going to do https://news.ycombinator.com. And that'll take us to the home page of Hacker News. And from here, we can start to interact with this web page. So if we jump over into Firefox now, if I do Command Option I and open up the inspector, and then as an example, if we want to grab the logo of the website, if we take a look at this, we can see we have this anchor tag with the text inside of it that says Hacker News. And if we look at this, we can see it's wrapped with an element that has a class of HNName. So if we wanted to grab the text from this using Selenium Webdriver, we can basically use a method called findElement. And in this case, I want to say find the element that has a class of HNName and get the text from that. And just like that, we can grab the title of this website. So additionally, if we want to come back in here, if let's say I want to grab the #1 article on the home page of Hacker News, if we look at the inspector and come up here, we can see that this is an anchor tag. We can see the text with the title of the article is inside of that. If we look going up a little bit, we can see this is wrapped with an element that has a class of title. And if we come up a little further, we can see that all of this is basically inside of a table row that has a unique ID as well as a class of a thing. So we can basically take any of that information and use it with Selenium Webdriver to start interacting with this element. So for example, I could grab that ID and we could come back over here and we could say driver.findElement, and we can basically say I want to find the element that has an ID that is that, so we'll pass in that unique ID, and then again we can say I want to grab the text from that element. And in this example, you can see we're grabbing not only that title text, but basically all of the text from within that table row. So we're getting not just the title, but we're getting the Hacker News rank, we're getting the URL. So if we want to try to narrow that down and maybe grab just the article title, we could come back in here, and if we go back down, we can see that that anchor tag has a class of story link. So in this case, we can grab that class and we can come back here and again do driver.findElement, and we can say again, I want to find the element that has a class of story link, and then we can say I want to grab the text from that. and that'll get us just the title of the article in that case. And if we wanted to grab the actual URL for that article, instead of text, we could do something like this and say href instead, and that'll get us the URL for the article. We could also use another method called attributes. We could do dot attribute, and we could pass in href, and that's just another way that we can get the URL for that. So now, what if we want to grab not just the title and the URL of the first article, but the title and the URL of every single article on this page? So if we jump back into our inspector, if we again look at this, we can again see that this entire thing is wrapped in this table row that has a class of a thing. So now if we go up to the second record, and if we look at that as well, we can see that that is also wrapped with a table row that has a class of a thing. And again, if we look at the third record, we'll see that basically every record on this page has this pattern where each one is a table row that has this class of a thing. So what we can do then is back in our terminal, we can do driver, and we can use a method that's actually just the plural of find elements. We can do find elements, and we can basically say find every element on this page that has a class of a thing. So I'm going to assign that to a variable called elements, and if we look at the size of that now, we can see that we have 30 items in that, and if we look back at the page, we can see that there are 30 different articles listed on the page. So it looks like that worked. So now if we look at the first item that we have, and if again we try to do find element, and we look for the element that has that class of story link, if we look for the text on that, we'll see that that is the first article on the page. And if we do the same thing but do last and do find element, and again look for a class of story link, get the text from that, we'll see if we look at the bottom of the page, we can see that that is the last article on the page. So basically we now have this array of all of the articles on the page. So what we can do is iterate over that and create our own new object that has the title and the URL for each article. So what I can do is basically we can say like Hacker News data equals, and we'll take that variable that we have of elements, and we can iterate over that with, we can use each with object, and we can set up our base object to be an array. And what we can do is say do item object, where item is going to be each individual Hacker News article, and object is going to be the object that we're creating. So what we can do then is for each individual item, I want to scoop that into my object, and what we're going to do is create just a new hash, and in that I'm going to say title, and we'll just set that equal to item.findElement, and again we're just going to find the element that has a class of story link, and we just want to grab the text from that, and then we also want to grab the URL, and again for that we're just going to do item.findElement, and again class story link, but this time we're going to grab the href, and then we can close our object and we can end that block. And now once that's finished doing its thing, if we look at that hn data variable, we can see that we actually have this brand new object where basically for each article on the page we now have the title and the URL. So if we look at hndata.size, we can see that that's 30, and if we look at hndata.first, we can see that we basically have grabbed this first article and we set the title and we set the URL to the article. Similarly, we have hndata.last is the last article on the page. We've taken the title and the URL and we've actually added that into our new object. So now at this point, let's actually just throw this into a script. So I'm going to open up a new tab in my terminal, and I'm going to create a new file. I'm just going to call this automation.rb, and then we can go ahead and open that up. I'm going to open it in Sublime. So now let's require in Selenium Webdriver, and I'm also going to require in pry so that we can do some debugging, and then additionally I'm going to require in CSV and JSON so that we can store the data from our script to a CSV and JSON file, and then we can use that to upload it to Google Sheets in the next step of this. So basically, if you recall from what we just did in our terminal, we can say create a new variable called driver, and we'll set that equal to Selenium Webdriver. And then we'll do .for and pass in Firefox. So we'll open up a new instance of Firefox. And then what we want to do is we want to say driver.get, and we want to navigate to news.ycombinator.com. So we'll go to the home page of Hacker News. And then from there, let's see, what did we do? So basically we want to find every element on the page of the home page that has the class of a thing. So that'll grab basically all of the articles for us from the homepage of Hacker News. So we can say elements equals driver.find elements that have a class of a thing. And then after that, we basically did all of this. So we can just basically copy over what we did here. So we're going to create a new variable called hnData, and then we're going to use each with object to iterate over each article from the home page. So we're going to add each article to our array. And for each one, we want to get the title of the article, and we want to get the URL of the article. And then we can close our object and we can end our block. And then I'm going to throw a pry in here. And I have a feeling, I'm not sure if pry will actually catch if it's the last line. So I'm just going to put an empty puts below that. But what we can try to do now is we can actually just exit our IRB. And you can see that that killed the Firefox browser behind it there. But now if we look, we are inside of this folder that has this new file we created. So let's actually just try to run our script and see if we get to that same point. So I'm going to do ruby automation.rb. If we hit that, that should open a new Firefox browser. We see that it does. Now it's going to Hacker News. And if we look back here, it looks like we hit our binding.pry. So now if we look at hnData, we can see that that has created an array. And let's see, does that array have... okay, so it has 30 items in it, and it looks like everything is structured correctly. Okay, so everything's working so far, but I want to grab some additional data beyond just the title and the URL for each one of these articles. So if we jump back over into Firefox, if I again open up the inspector with Command Option I, if we come over here, if we look at, for example, the first article, so currently we're grabbing the URL and the title text from this element. But in addition to that, I would also like to grab the number of points that the article has, the number of comments the article has, and then I also want to grab the link to the comment section in Hacker News for each article. So if we look at this, we can see we have an href here, and this has a URL that's basically item with a query parameter of ID. And I think that this ID will match the ID for the entire table row. So if we look at this again, if we take a look at that table row, we can see we have an ID, it's 218 and it ends with 518. If we look at points, for example, we can see 218, 518. And if we look at comments, we can see the URL is 218, 518. So basically, if we get that ID, we should be able to use that to target kind of everything else that we want to grab for each item. So let's jump back into our script. And I'm actually going to put a pry into our block here, and I'm going to exit out of this, and I'm just going to rerun our script now. And what should happen is we should hit our pry for the first item inside of that block. So we can see that opened up Firefox, went back to Hacker News, and now if we look here, we can see we hit our pry, and if we look at item, that should be the first item in our list of articles. So we can check that by basically doing item.findElement, and again passing in story link and getting the text. And we can see from that we're looking at the first article on the page. So basically what I want to do is I want to come back over here and I want to grab the ID for that table row. So we should be able to do item.attribute and just pass in ID. So then using that, I should be able to get the rest of the information that I want here. So I'm going to create a new variable called ID and just set it to that. And now, for example, if we want to grab the score for this article, if we look at this, we can see that this has an ID that is score underscore and then that ID. So what we should be able to do is say score equals driver.findElement, and I'm going to pass in ID. And we can use string interpolation and basically do score underscore and pass in that ID. And we can get the text of that. So that handles getting the score. So now for the comments, this is going to be a little bit trickier. We basically want to search for this element and try to find it by its href attribute and the matching value. So what we can do is, if we come back over here, so for this we might actually have to use xpath. So xpath is a little screwy if you've never seen it before, but basically what we can do is we can use it in this case to search for an element by its attribute. So we want to search for it by href, and we want to find the element that has the matching value for the href. So what we can do, for example, is we can do driver.findElement, and then what we want to do is, instead of searching by ID or class, in this case we're going to do xpath, and then the syntax for this is a little screwy, but basically we're going to do / and then asterisk and then brackets, and then inside of those brackets we can basically put in the attribute that we want to search for. So we need to use an @ sign as well, but basically we can do that, and then we can say we want to use href because we're looking for the href, and then we want to find the element where the href is equal to a certain value, and for the value it's going to be this structure. So where item $ID equals the specific ID. So we can do item $ID equals, and then we can use string interpolation and pass in that ID. And if that works, that should find the specific element with the number of comments in this case. So if we look at that and get the text, oh, you know what? It looks like there's actually multiple elements. So what we can do then is we can actually use find elements. So we can use the plural to find multiple elements. We can't find the text on that because that's an array. So we'll do that. We'll do we'll just set a variable for that. We'll say it looks like there's 2 items. So if we look at first.text, that is when it was posted, and if we do last.text, we can see that's the comment. So what we'll actually need to do then is we will do driver.findElements, and we'll get the last element, and then what we can do from there is get the text, and we can also get the URL value for the actual comment section on Hacker News for that article. Okay, hopefully that's not too confusing. So let's jump back into our script for a second. We can get rid of the pry here, but let's update this script to add the additional data that we want to collect from the page. So I'm going to go back here. What we want to do is, for each item in the page that we're going to iterate over here, we want to set the ID. So each item is going to have a unique ID. And then what we can do is, inside of that object we're creating, for each one we can additionally set the score value. So we have the title, the URL, we're going to say score and set it equal to this, and then we also want to grab the number of comments. So if we go back here, we can see what we ended up doing was driver.findElements, and then finding the last one. So we need to go back and grab this, and just do, let's see, that dot last. So we'll do that dot last dot text to get the number of comments, and then for the actual comment URL we will grab that, but actually just grab the href. So instead of that, we'll do href. Okay, so let's kill this. And let's actually rerun this now with those additional values and see what we end up with. So just to recap, what we've done is, for each item in the page, we are initially grabbing the specific unique ID for the item. And then in addition to the title and URL, we're going to get the score based off the unique ID on that element in the page. And then we're also going to grab the comments and the comment URL. So let's see what happens if we run that again. So we'll do Ruby automation. So that should open up a new instance of Firefox. Now we're navigating to Hacker News, and it looks like something in our script did not work. So if we look, unable to locate element with ID score, and then that unique score. So let's open back up Firefox, and let's go to Hacker News. And so now if we take a look at this page, let's see. So it wasn't able to find an element with an ID of score underscore and then this number. So let's just see if I search the page for that ID. Let's see. We can see, okay, so it looks like the issue here is that we're hitting a listing in Hacker News that doesn't actually have a score value. So basically when we're trying to find that ID, it doesn't actually exist, and then our script explodes. So that's kind of annoying, but let's just drop score for now from the data that we collect, and let's rerun our script and see what happens now. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to do Ruby automation.rb, and let's run our script. That should open up a new instance of Firefox. Go to Hacker News, and then we should hit our binding.pry. It looks like we do. So now if we look at that new variable, which is hn data, we can see it looks like for each article now we're getting a title, we're getting a URL, we have the number of comments, and we have the comment URL within Hacker News. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to save this as both a JSON and CSV file. And then what we can do is take the CSV specifically and upload that to Google Sheets after this. So what we can do then is we can do file.open. And inside of that, we can say we want to create a new file called hndata.json, and we want to write to that. And then we can create a block, and we can basically just do f.puts, and we can take that new variable that we created, which is hndata, and we can do .to JSON on that. And that should create a new file for us. And we can confirm that just by doing file.read. And reading back that file that we just created. So we can do hndata.json. And then what we can do is create a CSV as well. So we can do hndata CSV equals, and we'll do csv.generate. And then we'll do CSV. And then we'll do json.parse. And we'll actually just pull back in that file that we just created. So we can do file.open, hndata.json. And then we can read that, and we will parse that, and then we want to do .each, and we'll do hash, and then we can add the value from each hash into our CSV. And then we'll end that, and we'll end our block. And so now we should basically have the CSV format as a giant string inside of hndata CSV. So that looks good. So what we can do then is we can do file.open, and we'll create a new file called hndata.csv, and we want to write to that, and then we'll do a block, and again we'll do f.puts, and we'll put hndata csv, and again we can read that just to make sure that that works. So we can do file.read, we'll do hndata.csv. Okay, so now I want to add all of that logic back into my script before we go forward. So let's see where we left off with the script. So we're creating the object, and then what we want to do is after we create that object, we need to first create our JSON file. So we did that here in our terminal, so we can just copy that over. So we created our object, we can then create the JSON file and save that. And then what we want to do is we want to, we're going to create the CSV file. So we'll copy this block in here after that. So create the new CSV. Okay, so let's actually, let's just quit this. Let's see, we have our automation.rb file, but now we have this CSV and this JSON that we created. So I'm actually going to remove those. Okay, and let's actually rerun our script now and see if everything works. So by the time we hit our binding.pry now, we should have collected all of the data from Hacker News, and then we should have already actually created our JSON and CSV files. So let's again run the script. So we can do ruby automation.rb. So it's going to open Firefox, and that'll run our script. Cool, so we hit our pry, and if we look now, we can see that we created our JSON file. Oh, you know what? We're missing a line. So if we go back here, we didn't do this yet. So if we add that, come back here, kill the script, remove that file. Okay, so let's run our script again. So it should create the JSON file, create the CSV file, and then hit our binding.pry. So let's see, we hit our pry. If we look back over here, so let's see if I do file.read and we look for that CSV file, let's see we have that. And similarly, if we do that for the JSON file, okay, so that takes care of the first step of our process, which is going to Hacker News, getting the data, and then creating a CSV file with the data that we want to store. So the second step of the process that we want to do now is we want to then go to Google, log into a Gmail account, go to Google Apps, open up Google Sheets, and actually upload that data into Google Sheets. So what we can actually do is we can do driver.git, and we can navigate over to Google. So we can do that. And so now the first thing that we want to do here is we actually want to sign into our account. So I'm going to do Command Option I. And if we inspect the page, we can see we have this sign in button up here. And what we can actually do with Selenium Webdriver is we can actually target this button based off of the link text. So in my terminal, I can do driver.findElement, and we can actually use link text and say basically find the link that has the text of sign in, and then click on that. And that'll bring us to the sign in window. So what I can do now is I can try to find this input field. So if we look at this, we can see that has an ID of identifier ID. So we can copy that. And then we can tell Selenium Webdriver, we can say find element, and we'll say ID, so find the element with the ID of identifier ID. And then what we want to do here, and we haven't done this yet, is we want to actually enter some text into that input field. So we can do that with Selenium Webdriver using the method sendKeys. And in my case, I actually have my email as an environment variable that I want to use here. So I can just say sendKeys and pass in the environment variable of email. Oh, you know what? Sorry, it's uppercase, so it should be email. And you can see that just filled the email field there. So then we can find that next button and click on that. So if we inspect and look for the next button, we can see we have this div. We have this div outside of it. We can see that div has an ID of identifier next. So what we can do is we can try to target that element. So we can do driver.findElement. We'll find by the ID. We'll do identifier next. And we want to click on that. So that works. So now we have to enter our password. So again, we can inspect this. We can see that that is an input that has type password. So it looks like what we can actually do here is we can use xpath again. We can basically try to target this element by its type, where type matches to password. So what we can do is driver.findElement, and what we're going to do is pass in xpath. And then what we're going to do is, again, we're going to do that weird syntax where we do like the double backslash and then asterisk and then brackets. And then inside of the brackets, we can look for type is equal to password. And it looks like it finds that. So what we can do is basically say, again, we want to use that sendKeys method, and then I'm again going to pass in an environment variable. For me, that's just going to be pass. And we can see that that fills. So again, I want to find that next button. So if we check that out, we can see that that has this ID of password next. So let's try that. So we'll do driver.findElement. We want to find the element with the ID of password next, and we want to click on that. Cool. Okay, so that works. Now we are signed into Google. So next thing we want to do is we want to open up this button because this contains Google Apps, and within that we have our Google Sheets. So if we go over here and we inspect this, if we look, we can see that it has a title, and the title is Google Apps. So again, we can use XPath basically to target elements by any attributes. So before we use it mostly for href, or in the case of the password field, we use it for the type. In this case, we can use it to find the element that has a title that equals Google Apps. So XPath is super flexible. It's a little bit weird if you've never seen it before though. But basically what we can do is we come back in here and we can do driver.findElement, XPath. We can again do that weird syntax. So it's like the double backslash with an asterisk and then brackets. But then within that we can do title and say equals, and we want to find the element that has a title that equals Google Apps, and we want to click on that. So if that works, that should open up that little toggle. Cool, so that works. So we can see it opens that toggle. So then we want to inspect that now. And if we look at Sheets, let's see. So if we look at that, we can see that has an ID of GB283. So let's do driver.findElement, find the element that has an ID of GB283, and we want to click on that now. Cool. Okay, so that works. So now we want to open up a new spreadsheet. So if we inspect this, if we look here, we can see we have this set of these different panels. So docs home screen, item section. We can see these unique IDs, or this class of like docs home screen templates, template view. So maybe we can grab like one of these classes. So let's see what happens if we do like driver dot find element by class, and we'll pass in, is that one class? It is. So let's see if we do that. Let's see what happens if we click on that. Okay, that doesn't work. What if we do this specific ID for that one? So if we do driver dot find element by ID and click on that. Let's see. Okay, so that opens up a new blank sheet for us. So that's cool. So now what we want to do is we want to upload the CSV file that we saved from Hacker News into this new spreadsheet. So let's see. What we need to do is click on File. So we look at that. We can see that has a unique ID. So we can driver.findElement by ID, look for that ID, and we'll click on that. So that opens up File. Cool. And then what we want to do is import our file now. So we need to, let's see. So let's see if we can click on the item where aria label equals import I maybe. So again, we can use xpath to target that. So we can do driver.find element. We'll find it by xpath, and then we'll use that weird syntax. So double backslash, asterisk, brackets, and then we can pass in the @ sign and then the attribute that we want to target and its value. So we can do aria label equals, in this case, it's going to be import I. And we can try to click on that now. Oh, you know what? I missed the asterisk. How'd that happen? Let's see. Okay, cool. That works. Okay. So now inside of this, we want to click on the upload button. But I think that this is, yeah, so this is inside of an iframe. So this gets a little bit trickier, but using Selenium Webdriver, you can actually navigate that, which is super cool. So what we can actually do is we can switch to the specific iframe we want by finding the name of the iframe. So if we look at this, for example, in this iframe for the upload window, the name is here. The tricky thing with this is I'm pretty sure that the name changes for this every time you reload the page. So if you hard code this value into your script, it's not going to work the next time you try to run it. So basically what we need to do to future-proof this is set up a way that we can get the name of the iframe every time without knowing it in advance. So what we can do as a starting point is we can actually find all of the elements on the page by their tag name. In this case, it's going to be iframe. And if we look at that, we can see we have, let's say iframes, and look at the size of that. So there's 6 iframes in this page. So what we can do then is get the attribute name for each iframe to see where we hit our actual name on this, to see where our iframe is in that list of iframes, basically. So let's say if we do iframes.each, or let's actually do each with index. And let's say iframe index. And then let's actually, oh, hold on, we gotta do. And then let's actually say puts, we wanna do like iframe dot attribute name is index. Let's see if that works. Okay, let's see. So no name, whatever that is 2, whatever that is 3, no name is 4. It looks like the very last one is the name that we want. So we can see that that matches there. So basically the last iframe in our list is the one that we want, is what it looks like. Yep. So for now, what we can do is basically always grab the last iframe from that list and get the name from that. And then from there we have the name. So we can basically say switch from the default content, which is the main page, into that iframe, and then we can actually interact with the upload iframe. So let's assign that to a variable. So we'll say iframe name equals that value. And then what we can do to switch from the default content of the page into a specific iframe is we can do driver.switch to .frame, and then we can pass in the name of the iframe that we want to switch to. So in this case, we have this variable iframe name. So if everything works, that should switch us into the upload iframe. And now we should be able to interact with the content in that iframe. So if we go back to this now, we want to click on the upload button inside of this iframe. So if we look at this, we can see that this has a unique ID. So let's see if we can do driver dot find element that has ID of that and click on that. Cool. So we can do that. So now we want to upload our file. So this part gets a little bit tricky because I don't think we can actually interact with the file upload prompt the way that you would if you were actually navigating this as a human. So in order to get around this, we have to basically upload our file directly to the input field for the file. So what we have to do is inspect the page basically. And if we look at this, we want to find an input field for the file. And then what we can do is basically use send keys to submit our CSV file to that field. So if we look here, if we go down, we've got, okay. So underneath the importer, we actually have this input where type equals file. So what we want to do is target this input field with Selenium Webdriver, and we can actually basically send our file to it using send keys. So if we go back in here now, if we do driver dot find element, and again, if we use xpath, and we use that funky syntax, we can do that, and then we want to do at type equals file, and what we can do is we can try to just send our file directly to that. So we do driver.find element xpath where type equals file, and then we can do send keys. And let's see, I think we can just do something like this. So I'm going to do dir.pwd, and then I'm going to set hn data csv. Cool. Okay, that worked. Perfect. So if we look now, that is switched to this importer modal. So if we look, it looks like we're outside of our iframe now. Yeah, we're not in an iframe anymore. So what we want to do is switch back to the default content of the page. So we can do that by doing driver.switch to .default content. And then what we can do is we can interact with this now. And what we want to do, if we jump back over here, let's pull this down a little bit. We want to import our data. So let's click on that and see. We can see that has this class. We could target it by that class or that name. Let's just try the class. So if we do driver.find element by class, where class name is goog button set action .click. Cool. It looks like that works. And now we are importing our data. Awesome. So if we look at this now, we've imported the CSV that we created from Hacker News. So now we have this column that has all of the titles from the homepage of Hacker News, the URLs for each one of those articles, the number of comments, and the URL to the specific comment section within Hacker News for that article. Okay, so this should be everything that we just did for the Google side of things added into our script. Don't worry if I'm losing you at this point. I'm going to add a link below where you can literally copy and paste this entire thing. But let's go ahead and let's try to run our entire script in full now with the Hacker News portion and the Google portion. So this should create a brand new JSON and CSV file with all of the data on the homepage of Hacker News that we want. Then it should log us into Google. It should open up Google Spreadsheets. Then it should open up a new sheet and upload the data from our CSV into Google Sheets. So let's run it. All right, so it looks like everything's working. So our script can now go to Hacker News, collect a bunch of data from the home page, store it as a CSV and JSON file, navigate to Google, log us in, open up Google Apps, log into Google Sheets, create a new Google spreadsheet, and upload all that data from that CSV from Hacker News directly into Google Sheets. So now we have this list of all of the articles from the homepage of Hacker News. We have the titles, we have the URLs to the articles, we have the number of comments, and we have the links to the conversations on Hacker News for each article. So that was just meant to be like a quick introduction into playing around with Selenium. But basically taking what we just did, you should be able to apply that to whatever it is that you want to basically automate as far as web browsing behavior goes. And it's super powerful, I think. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool.